prophet in biblical times was not one who predicted the future, but one who discerned the difficulty in the present and took action to warn the people that something needed to change. So a very different concept of a prophet. Tonight we will look at Elijah and the journey he makes, which is our journey. It's an archetypal journey, meaning that we all take this and we will go through the stages of Elijah's journey, how he got to that higher state of consciousness that is represented by Elisha. Elijah is considered the prophet par excellence. He had some degree of illumination and power, but he interpreted what he saw in the beginning from a human perspective. And he was saying, I alone am God's only prophet. I alone can fix this. All right, here's what you need to do. So he does declare an intention, but then he has to prepare to carry that forth, and then he has to test where he is on the path to be sure before he confronts the wrongdoing that he is truly capable of it. And then there is the contest. Oh my, that's probably as far as we will get tonight. His name means Jehovah is God. God is God. All right, there's only one God. First, we have to consider the historic context to fully understand Elijah. This took place during the divided kingdom. As you may recall, under the reign of King Solomon's son, Rehoboam, there was a rebellion, and Jeroboam led this rebellion and went up north and declared himself to be the king of Israel. So there was a division here. 10 tribes went with him of the 12. The southern was called Judah, the northern kingdom, Israel. Okay. And with a divided kingdom came a divided consciousness, something that broke down monotheism. Just as there had been one nation, there was a belief in the one power and one presence, and now things were different because King Ahab was in charge, and he had married Jezebel, and they had a very, very different view of God and gods and prophets. Also, it's necessary to give you something about the authorship. During the exile, this whole portion of the Bible, from Joshua through 2 Kings, was rewritten. Why would they do that? Because they were looking for a reason to explain how God's chosen people could wind up in exile. During the reign of King Josiah, who was a king in the southern kingdom, the book of Deuteronomy was discovered, and in the book of Deuteronomy, all the kings were re-evaluated in the light of whether they obeyed the law or whether they disobeyed the law. King Ahab, who was the 6th king of the northern kingdom, came out pretty bad on the report card, because in marrying Jezebel, he compromised his allegiance to the one power and one presence. She was from Canaan. She brought with her 850 prophets. In addition to that, the northern kingdom was cut off from Jerusalem, and therefore they were in violation big time of the law. And during that time, God was considered law. You obeyed the law and you were blessed. You disobeyed the law and you were cursed. And God was responsible for everything. So God brought the exile because of all this disobedience to the law. Now, Baal, have to talk a little bit about Baal. He was not actually such a bad god, but he was a god of rain and a god of fertility. When the Israelites went from being nomads to settling in Canaan, the existing inhabitants were farmers. And so they had this god Baal, because for farmers, rain is important. Good crops are important. And this was Jezebel's god. And by the time that this saga begins, King Ahab had converted half of Israel to Baal worship, and he had supported all of these 850 prophets of Jezebel. He even had windows in the temple where the rain would come in. So they had rites in their services, which were fertility rites, and this greatly offended the Israelites. And so here comes Elijah, and he appears literally out of nowhere. In 1 Kings 17, it starts right out from the first verse there. Elijah, the Tishbite from Gilead. Oh, who's Elijah? He had never appeared before. That is kind of the way that prophecy strikes you. You suddenly see something that a practice or a whole entire belief system that is so threatening to that stable the spiritual infrastructure, if you will, that you feel called upon to go and speak truth to power. And so Elijah does that. So this would be actually the first stage of the journey. Elijah goes right up to King Ahab and he says, there's going to be a drought because only God can bring rain. And so until the Lord sees fit to bring rain, we're going to have a drought. And so he's declared his intention. However, he has to flee. Yeah, he has to flee because you can't just make a declaration to the king who is very powerful. And who are you? Excuse me, you're going to call a drought. And so it gives you the correct notion that a prophet is a mouthpiece for the one power and one presence. He was saying, God is going to speak through me, and when God is ready to bring rain, God will do it. But until then, there's going to be a drought. So what does a drought signify? It means something that will dry up adverse thinking and attitudes. Okay, we don't need to nurture and fertilize these ideas that are tearing the country apart. Okay, so he flees, he goes to this little creek, and he is guided. The Lord guides him, Spirit guides him to this little wadi, which is like a little creek, and he is told that ravens will come and feed you. Ravens who are, scavenger birds, basically. And that you will have, I'll read you his diet. His diet is the ravens and water. It seems to me they had something else, but so he had food and water. But in order to be prepared more for his mission, we have to understand that water is energy and that visible substance comes from an invisible source. And so he drinks from this wadi until it dries up, and then he waits for further guidance. That's pretty much the way it works. You don't see the end of the story. It's that each step of the way you receive new guidance. So he is guided, and this is a good part. He goes to Zarephath. Zarephath means purification. Is that not what we do? Because we are already connected to Spirit. We are whole. And just in case there are some blocks to expressing that wholeness, as obviously there are, they have to be purified out. Also, he's guided to go inward. He goes east to that wadi. Going east is going within. And when we go within, we not only expand our awareness of that one power and one presence, but Like a snowplow, what needs to be purified out does so. And so he receives that clear guidance that he is to go to Zarephath, place of purification, where he will find a widow who will feed him. Now, that's a very odd thing, because a widow is not the most likely person who is able to take care of him. Also, this is Jezebel's country, Zarephath. And I will just read you a bit of this. Also note that Spirit always takes us in the direction of good if we follow it. All right. So, here she is. The word of the Lord came to him, saying, Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. For I have commanded a widow there, gathering sticks. And when he came to the gate of the town, just before he's entering into this realm of materialism, let's see, where am I? When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there, gathering sticks. He called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel, so that I may drink. As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. But she said, As the Lord your God lives, your God, get that? I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Doesn't look like he's going to get very much here, right? He's walked right into this realm of thinking, of lack. I only have a sense of limitation on what can be found. What is a widow? A widow, being female, one who has lost her husband, a widow is then the faculty of love, in a human sense, bereft of wisdom. And she has a son who is like on the verge of death. So, literally, she's in a very, very bad position. And this is where he was commanded to go. It's like if you got a command to go to the jungle in Africa and you said, right, I'm going because I trust that my good is there. Or I'm going to, I get the message I'm supposed to go to Bongo Land, which symbolizes, that was not to cast aspersions on the Belgian Congo, but just to say that it's unlikely guidance that we often get, but we don't trust it and we don't act on it. Not realizing it just doesn't sound good to our own human awareness. But Elijah goes and he finds a widow, just as was promised him, and he knows he is entering into a realm of human, limited, materialistic thinking. So what does he say to her? She's just told him she's only got itsy bitsy, and he says, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain onto the earth." So she listens, all right? And it was as Elijah had said, that the oil did in fact last, and the meal did in fact last. So he's testing his consciousness of infinite substance, that we are provided with infinite substance. After this, the son of the woman became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O Son of God?" All right, do we ever do that when we have something adverse happen to us? Do we blame God? I have a very good friend who thought that God was punishing her because so many adversities were coming. So think, who do you blame, if you do blame someone for the situation? And so here she is blaming Elijah, the man of God. She said to Elijah, "You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance." That was the belief. That is the human belief, that you had to have done something wrong in order to merit sickness and to cause the death of my son. So here, he had two things he had to demonstrate. He had to demonstrate to her that he knew a higher truth, first about abundance and now about eternal life. So he takes the boy. It's a really good story, I have to say. He carried him up to the upper chamber, higher consciousness, where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed of consciousness. Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times. Body, soul, spirit. And cried out to the Lord. Here's his affirmation. "O Lord, my God, let this child's life come into him again." So the woman said to Elijah, and of course that came about too, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is spirit." So think of what Elijah, remember all of this is within one consciousness. So if there are thoughts of lack, you have to remember the truth that there is infinite abundance to provide us in every situation if we think to access it, that death is not the reality, that life is the reality, and that by lifting consciousness, he put the boy on his bed of consciousness and lifted him, and he breathed into him. Okay, you remember the breath of life in Genesis. And so here he's breathing life first into his spirit, then into his soul, and then into his body, and then he carries him down to the widow. And so she needed that wisdom which Elijah gave to her. And love and wisdom go together. They have to go together. Love is indiscriminate. We love everything. We use it like a super form of like, right? But love is a faculty of connection. That if I love someone, that means I acknowledge that that person and I are from the same source. So Elijah and the widow, one source. We have both truth thinking capacity and we have human limited thought. We have both at different times. But now we are strengthening ourselves and finding that both intellect and love, feeling nature, thinking nature and feeling nature are mutually enriched by truth teachings. Right? Yeah. And so that completes Elijah's preparation. He thinks, okay, now I've got it. I'm going to simply affirm the truth. I'm ready to go back to Ahab. Oh, but not quite so fast. So he heads back and he gets halfway, where he meets Obadiah, who has come out to warn him. Read you a passage from Obadiah. Okay. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year of the drought. 3rd year, 0 water. Absolutely none. So the farmers must be pretty desperate by then, saying, "Go, present yourself to Ahab. I will send rain to the earth." Okay. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria. And you remember that Samaria was the capital of that northern kingdom. And because it was a divided kingdom at this point, that it was, the capital of Israel had become Samaria. And when the Assyrians invaded the north, they assimilated all those Israelites into their culture. And so Samaria mixed blood, and they were outcasts. Remember the woman at the well? She was a Samaritan. And anyway, so there was famine in Samaria. Nothing, no visible substance, no spiritual substance to uplift the people. And let's see, Ahab summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. As Obadiah was on the way, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, fell on his face, and said, "Is it you, my lord Elijah?" He answered him, "It is I. Go tell your lord that Elijah is here." And he said, this is Obadiah, "How have I sinned that you would hand your servant over to Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom to which my Lord," now Lord here is with a small l, all right, "my Lord has not sent to find you." And when they would say, "He is not here," he would require an oath of the kingdom or nation that they had not found you. But now you say, "So tell your Lord that Elijah is here. As soon as I have gone from you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you I know not where. So when I come and tell Ahab that he cannot find you, he will kill me, although I, your servant, have revered the Lord from my youth." Here we have a divided consciousness. Has it not been told, my Lord, that what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, capital L here? How I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, all right, so they wouldn't all be wiped out in one go, and provided them with bread and water. So his allegiance, inner allegiance, his spiritual allegiance is to God, but he's serving Ahab. Okay. Elijah said, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today." So it's like when we're about to do something big. We've gotten up our courage, we've prepared with strength, and on the way, some doubts creep in. You know, look what happens. This is what happens. You get killed. You speak truth to power. I've reclaimed my power, but I just need a little reassurance. How well I know that big plans, and then as you're about to do them, just the little doubts creep in and sort of eat away at that resolve. So this is a great study in, basically heart in a good place, mind illumined, and yet there's still something that needs to change here. So it strengthens his resolve. Interestingly, here's Obadiah, and he sees that you can't serve two masters. And so he goes to Ahab. And this next scene is so hilarious. The contest between, he tells Ahab, and Ahab says to him, this is wonderful, he says to him, well, I'll read it from here. This is, he tells Ahab, who calls him a troubler of Israel, and he says, "I'm not the troubler, you're the troubler, and look what you've done," So they exchange insults here. And he says, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah, I have not troubled Israel, but you here and your father's house, because you have forsaken the commandments. Wait a minute. I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house. That consciousness that gave rise to this division, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now therefore, have all Israel assemble for me at Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, in English it would be Carmel, which is fruitful garden, and it's on a mountain, so it's high, all right, high consciousness. And he challenges Ahab, saying, bring everybody, bring Jezebel, bring all of the 450 prophets of Baal, the 400 prophets of Asherah, another branch of Baal, and we'll have a contest. We're going to see. We're going to see whose God is right. My God's better than your God. We've seen times in the world history, where my God is better than your God, right? Still do, I guess. And so the description of this is so hilarious. So they gather, and what the Baals do, they get to go first. And they have this altar that is made by them. All right, an altar is a place in consciousness where the human and the divine meet. Also, where you sacrifice, it's a place of sacrifice of those things that do not serve you. So they each have an altar, but so the Baals have this altar, and they are given a bull with sacrificial animal, and give them the wood, and they are to call upon their God to bring fire. Okay, and if the fire comes down and consumes the sacrifice, victory for the Baals. Now, Elijah repairs the altar of the Lord. He takes 12 stones. The altar of the Lord, capital L, had been thrown down. All right, isn't that what happened in Ahab's kingdom? And 12 stones. Remember, 10 of the tribes were in the north and 2 in the south. So he built the altar of the Lord using 12 stones. All right, complete. It's complete fulfillment. And so the Baals, it says, they limped around the altar from morning until noon, crying out, and no voice was heard. And Elijah mocks them. I mean, he's like, he's got a little bit of an ego here. He mocks them and he says, how long will you go limping with 2 different opinions? And if I could find my paper here.
But the 2 different opinions?
Yeah. Worshipping one God and swearing allegiance to another. Okay. Sorry, I don't see. Oh, here we go. I have to read this to you. Okay, so here, so Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping with two different opinions, a divided consciousness?" Right? He said, "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer. Then Elijah said to the people, I only am left the prophet of the Lord. Only I can fix this, all right? But the Baal prophets are 450, and a total of 850. Let the two bulls be given to us, and let them choose one bull for themselves. Okay, they get to choose. They get to go first, and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. So you get the picture? Same setup here. And you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. Now that's the deal. And all the people answered, it is well spoken. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves one bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire to it. And they took the bull, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar which they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a God. Either he is musing, or he has gone aside, meaning gone to the bathroom, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves. But there was no voice. No one answered. No one heeded. Then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. And all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, who became Israel, right? And here's Israel with something missing here. To whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be your name. Israel shall be your nature. And remember, the name change came after Jacob wrestled with the angel all night. And as a result, he was wounded in the hip, but he prevailed. So he won the battle, and he had this reconciliation with Esau. And that's when his name was changed to Israel, a spiritual seeker. Okay, so here's Elijah. And he's got the bull, on the wood and everything. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 jars with water. That's important, the 4 jars of water. I mean, that is totally wet. All right. 4 means basic foundation. Like if you've been dead for 4 days, you can't be resurrected. If you have 4 jars of water, there's nothing that can take it away. And pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he did this 3 times. So it was 4, 4, and 4. And they did it a 3rd time, and the water ran around the altar and filled the trench. He dug this trench around the altar, also with water. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And let's see. Let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that thou, O Lord, art God, and that thou hast turned their hearts back. It's like you want to have God on your side. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, became one with it, appropriated it, took it in. And the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is God. He is God. And Elijah said to them, all right, he won. All right, he won the deal. Seize the prophets of Baal. Let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and killed them there. Okay. Limping around an altar means a very weak understanding of truth. Okay. You have to, this is where faith comes in. You have to know that God is present. It's so you can't sort of kind of half-heartedly say something and have something happen, because it has to happen through you. It doesn't happen for you, it happens through you. So we won the contest, and this they cut themselves up, because that's what they did. They then sacrificed themselves, and when there was all this blood, it was like, okay, all the life went out of these prophets. Okay. Yeah. What?
Well, what the water, 4 things of water.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
I mean,
there's no fire. There's no fire, okay?
There's
so
no fire.
he
There's
wants
really
to demonstrate there is really no fire, and they would say no possibility of fire. He has soaked this altar, he soaked the offering, he soaked the wood 3 times, all of them, 3 times. There was water everywhere. So he's saying, it doesn't matter what the situation is, how bad the situation looks. God is in charge here. So we called on God as the Lord of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Jacob, now Israel. Israel, that's what they're calling their kingdom, all right? Israel. And they're worshiping two gods, all right? So, and so nothing happens for the Baals. Can you compare the two strategies? When you are functioning from a spiritual center, it is totally effortless. There is no situation, no condition that is too difficult for the one power and one presence to resolve or to heal or to provide in some way. But with the Baals, a huge lot of effort, and this is so true that when we try to function only with material ideas, with material means, it's a lot of effort and no result. That is so true. I mean, the one thing about the silence in meditation is that you can go there, and as you incorporate that into your being, you come to develop that sense that you are provided for, that there is no condition that cannot be healed. You come to know these truths from experience. Whereas if you're always dealing with the outer world, a lot of effort, you always go to outside means to take care of situations that can only come from spirit. It's a lot of effort. Okay, that is a spiritual truth. Let's see. It is 6 minutes past 8. I will announce the phone number. So if you are watching, if you have any questions about Elijah, if you have any questions or comments about the various stages of the journey, I would welcome that. And the phone number is 816-301-6204. That is truly it. Most times it is on your screen, but I will repeat it one last time. 816-301-6204. That is the number of the new foundation. Now, I will continue if nobody calls in, but I am awaiting your call. And so, now what happens when you take on this huge project and you say, I'm going to cleanse every single negative thought and prejudice and everything that I have ever done, any negative thought, belief system I have ever had, and I'm going to take care of it all at once. Oh? Well, there's a backlash, and this happens inside of you. And whenever you try to force things, as Elijah did here, killing all these prophets, he didn't need to do that. And so he once again has to flee because Jezebel is angry. She's furious. and he flees.
So why don't we get the message that he should be more temperate?
Because he's learning.
Because he's still Elijah.
He's still Elijah. We will get to the still small voice in just a minute. So he flees into the wilderness, and even here he receives protection, provision, he's given food, he is given guidance. Even, and you think, wow, he's done for. And in us, when we do that, it's like that process called chemicalization, where you infuse a huge amount of energy into your system. And it's like the old clashing with the new, and the body has to really compensate, has to adjust in a dramatic way very quickly. The body is incredibly adaptable. We abuse it in so many ways, with our rest, with our food, with various things, and it adapts. And when you try to cleanse out everything all at once, you decide, let's say, to go on a 60-day fast, and you're not going to stop until, and it's like, okay, good intention, but you can't force something before it's ready. It's like it's a process that takes time to completely cleanse consciousness, particularly at the deepest levels, where there's anger that is stored. There is all kinds of things that are in the subconscious that we don't even, we're not even aware of. And all of that comes up, and it clashes with this reality of truth that there's only one God, one power, one presence, and that's God, the good, omnipotent, omniscient, and you could also interpret it as, if you want to see it as destruction. Metaphysically, it's forcing, trying to force your good. It seems like a little bit of overkill, but it brings a backlash. And so if you use destructive means, you get destructive coming right back at you. And boy, did Jezebel, she wasted no time whatsoever. And he ran scared. And suddenly you think, what have I done? What have I done? I alone, I'm the only one here defending God, and look. And so, but that's, all of that happens. The drought ends. Even before there's a sign of rain, after this scene, and Elijah is telling Ahab, says, go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of the rushing of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. And Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he bowed himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. Does that mean anything to you? Pondering, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And there were no clouds, but by and by, a little cloud, like a man's hand in rising out of the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you. So what he's telling Ahab, go back down to your level, because this rain is going to drown you. Okay. And in a little while the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. And the hand of the Lord, was upon Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So, and then he's fleeing. He's I'm getting out of Dodge here real fast. So here he is in the wilderness. And once again, he's just waiting for the next step. And read those already. Anyway, so he is shown a broom tree, and he puts his head down on a stone. So he has a nice protected place. And as he sleeps, the angel comes to him and says, "Rise and eat." And there he finds that he has been given some, I think, bread, cakes, and water. All right. Which is interesting because that's what he, told the widow. Okay. And then it happened again, and the angel came and said, "Rise and eat, for you will need this for your journey." So the first rise and eat, physical substance. But the second rise and eat, he goes on a 40-day and 40-night journey up to Mount Horeb, which is the same as Mount Sinai, where he views God from a cave, another protected place. It's really interesting. And so the Lord speaks to Elijah and says, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" And he says, "I alone, I am I've been your loyal servant for all these years, and I alone, and now they're trying to kill me." And he says, "Elijah, go into this cave and watch as I pass by." And it's truly one of the most beautiful passages in the Bible, 1 Kings 19. "And the Lord passed by, and there was wind, but the Lord was not in the wind. And there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And then the earthquake. The Lord was not in the earthquake, but in the still small voice." And then again, the Lord says, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" And so he says the same thing, except that not that they are trying to kill me. All right, that I alone am here. All right. And then he's given a new mission. And the reason, let's see, how are we doing on time here? Yeah, we still have 15 more minutes. So there's still time to call in. There's certainly time for you to email me and let me know if you're watching or not. What was I saying? He is totally revered. Elijah is revered on the level of Moses, because practically everything that Moses did, you see in Elijah. It's a universal journey, and the same with David. Okay, these are the three great heroes in Judaic scripture.
So why do David Moses not have to change
Oh, they did.
identity though? Moses, I had those 3 separate lives.
Moses
But they-
fulfilled, you see, you can only go so far with the intellect. You can only go so far understanding spiritual law. But you can't enter into the consciousness with knowing law only. If I say, Dean, I'm going to speak truth to you, there's only one power and one presence in this universe, and within you is a promised land. It's a source of infinite good, of infinite possibilities. That's true. And so maybe you decide that you want to go there, but you can only see it from a distance, because hearing about it, speaking about it, learning about it isn't going to get you there. It has to be experienced. I have seen, I feel, I have to tell you that this story of Elijah, this here that I've been quoting from, this is a paper I wrote in ministerial school as an assignment. It started out as an assignment, but it was really the first time when I saw myself in this journey, and as Elijah, it was like when I learned to meditate, that was the truth. I had the answer. I was going to convert, not literally convert, but I honestly thought that I would never do anything else. And then I came to Unity, and I saw they talk a lot about this still small voice, but they don't go there. What's the matter with these people? Do you see the difference? So Moses fulfilled that part of the journey that was his to do. And that's a real step, to see God as law, as principle. And the same with Elijah. He represents the prophet, but the prophets, Jesus brought fulfillment to the law and the prophets. He said, I'm not here to abolish the law. It's all part of one whole, the law and the prophets. So Moses got to look at the promised land. He knew it was there. He sent spies into the promised land, and the spies came back, some of them, and said, oh my God, there's giants living there. I mean, we look at something and say, I can never do that. This is way too much for me. But Joshua and Caleb came back and they said, there are definitely challenges, but we can do it. And he talked about the fruits of it. One branch, this huge branch that was one little grapevine, one little branch of grapes, and it took 2 men carrying it on a pole. So saying that the riches that come from that source are ever so much more than anything you could gain from staying where you are. All right. And that's another funny story. There's so many funny stories in the book of Numbers. Oh, they are like giants. And every time they tell the story, it got bigger. And the giants got huge. So it went from a challenge to huge, being giants, descendants of Amalek or somebody, and we would be crushed like grasshoppers. Okay, and so in the face of a challenge, we often diminish ourselves, thinking, giving power to the outside challenge, rather than claiming the power that is actually there. But it's more than claiming it, it's saying it's there and I am committed to bringing it forth. But it's a while, it's a 40-year, as long as it takes, and it's a step by step. And you don't get there all at once, and you don't kill yourself with purification in the process. So I could truly relate to this story, and one of the approaches to the Bible that we were given as an option, and there are many of them, but the love of the Bible, not meaning that you really, read it every night as a bedtime story. It means you see yourself in these characters because it's all part of one consciousness. And I so saw myself in Elijah, and I also have a Jezebel and a King Ahab, and some more than others, but I was Elijah because I spent a great deal of time in political activism, and not even politics, but taking my little babies to march with Mothers for Peace, and picketing the school board that was refusing to integrate. So, it's like, and I learned to meditate, and it's not like I stopped caring about these things, but that I had something to contribute by way of a more expanded consciousness, more discerning in how to approach it. That's what a prophet is. And so the rest of the journey, we will, and I definitely, I would encourage everyone to read that passage where he discovers that, God is in this still small voice, not in all of this outer stuff. Do we give more power to the turmoil in the world? Sometimes, sometimes it can be overwhelming. What's on the news? All the bad stuff, And it robs us, it could rob us of our power if we did not have enough strength within to see it in perspective. Judge righteous judgment. It exists, and it's good to know that it exists, but can we draw on that Elijah within us to say we need to warn people? I think that part is being done. But after he finds the still small voice, he sees his mission in a new way, and that it's to sanctify and to bless and to anoint and to heal. And the whole training of Elisha is really interesting. So, but we will save some for next week.
Pugilistic to a healing.
It's to a softer, yes. Elisha, just listen to the names. They mean the same thing. Elijah, very masculine oriented, and Elisha, the healing presence. And we'll spend most of our there's 3 sessions, by the way. This being number 1, 2 will be next week, and we'll finish this story of Elijah and the instructions he's given to anoint and how he returns. He returns by way of Damascus, and he has new instructions. And he does as he is told. Good evening, Mary. Mary?
Hello?
Hi, this is Eleanor. Turn off the...
I thought I was watching.
You...
Oh, okay, I turned it off.
Turned off.
Hello?
Yes, you are.
Are you guys live?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm watching. I guess there's a lag. Great.
There's a time lag,
much.
and you need to turn down the volume on your computer.
I turned it off.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so great class, thank you. My first comment is, would you provide maybe like a preparation for next class, like you said to read the passage, but if there are some terms you would suggest for us to look up
Sure.
to be better prepared, that would
Yes.
be great. The other thing is, do you remember when you did the book of Judges, you said that represented the evolution of the judgment faculty within us?
Yes. Showing...
Is there such an
Yeah.
Is there
Yes.
such an evolution going on with the prophets, and if so, which faculty is being evolved?
Wisdom, the joint faculties of wisdom and love, because this is about from Elijah, who has the wisdom, and then after his journey, he anoints Elisha, and Elisha is simply a higher state of consciousness of Elijah. So, if you want to prepare, where we left off tonight was 1 Kings 19. That's where the still small voice passage is. And then going to the place where he anoints Elisha, you can skip the parts about Ahab, but it's all in 2 Kings then about Elisha and the miracles that happen there. If you want to, I can give you a list of words.
Okay. Are you
I-
still on air? Because I don't want to miss it. I'm still watching here, so I don't want to miss it.
You're not missing.
You're missing
You're
it.
missing
You're in.
anything. You are it right now. I have one person here.
I'm in? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the wilderness, when Elijah is in the wilderness, there are just certain words that are metaphysically significant. So, for instance, if you look at the nouns and you look at the proper names, and if you look at the action phrases particularly, and I mentioned one of them, arise and eat. All right, that was a significant one. And now for the still small voice, the still small voice in and of itself, but the action phrases, go forth and stand upon the mount of the Lord. And so that's a phrase. And Elijah wrapped his face in his mantle. That's another important one. Anoint Hazael, king of Syria. Anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi. So look at the action phrases. And then he's told to return by way of the wilderness of Damascus. Anoint Elisha. These are new instructions.
Well, and this, to use the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary for that?
Yeah. These are from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And so, in realizing the wholeness of God in the silence, which is the point of this passage, Rather than in the external phenomena of life, we transcend duality. All right, we go beyond the appearance of polarity and are guided to return to activity with a directive that is to bless and to sanctify. It's more in keeping with the nature of that indwelling presence. So those are a few of the words for next time, but you can go ahead and read as much as you want. I'm not going to cover, I don't think, the vineyard one where it shows, what happens to Ahab. But if you go to where Elisha, and we'll talk about the miracles of Elisha and how they compare to the miracles of Elijah, and to Jesus, actually. So there's a three-way comparison.
Okay, and then two more questions if you have time. One is, if you go into the silence and you realize the truth, and you have that internal chemicalization that we talk about,
yes,
and Jezebel shows up and you have that internal struggle. So let's say I'm dealing with a certain way of habit that I normally respond to something. I act out on a certain whim that I have.
yes,
And I'm wanting to stop reacting like that in the physical. So I go in the silence, I meditate on it, I know the truth, I can even visualize myself reacting differently, but when I come out, I still have the same behavior reaction. Is that just like it's a matter of time before that starts to go away?
The first thing is to be aware of what triggers you. All right, to become aware of it, and with more awareness, it happens less and less. There's a precept in Reiki which says, just for today, do not worry. All right, just for today. You don't say, I'm never going to worry again. That's ridiculous. But you can become, every time you find yourself going into worry, you can bring yourself back. And if you do that, like for a few days, you find that your tendency isn't so much to, jump to the worst case scenario. Or if you react in anger just for today, and when you feel yourself getting irritated, if that's one of your habits to react sort of knee-jerk, then you have more awareness, so you have more of a time lag between the irritation and the impulse to react.
So basically, in the silence, in the meditation, I'm going to use that time to really kind of hit the slow button and watch what led up to my acting out in the way I did, so that I can begin to discern when the trigger got activated.
In the silence, there is simply a quieting down. It's shutting the door. Jesus says, go into the closet, go into the inner chamber, and close the door on the outside world. So you're quieting down, and you don't have all these external phenomena pulling on your awareness. And just going into the silence and being silent, you don't have to think about anything. You probably will think about things, but just the fact that you're having thoughts isn't a problem. It's that you can have thoughts, but you're not going to react to them because they're not going anywhere. And if you have an emotional reaction coming up, then you can just sit there and be with it without doing anything, because it's not going to have any negative consequences. That's the beauty of going into the silence. And you can have murderous thoughts or think that the world is coming to an end, and yeah, fine, but you're in a safe place. You're kind of in one of those cities of refuge, all right, where you are safe. One of those Levite places. So the silence is a wonderful practice to increase your awareness of self. And at the same time, I think I mentioned this in another series, but that if you think of it as like a snowplow, where at the same time you are moving forward in consciousness, you're clearing the way so that you can continue to move forward. And so, without doing anything, a lot of things just get dissolved. But there are things like deep, deep within us that are unconscious that can come up very unexpectedly. And that's when you can just simply sit there and be with it, knowing that just feeling right through it, you can lie down and rest. And it's the way those big, big things, if they come up like with, Jezebel, that you can still maintain your integrity without actually acting it out, outside of meditation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for calling in, because you are our only
great
caller.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Good night.
Right.
God bless you.
Thank you, guys. God bless you. You're doing great. Thanks, Eleanor. Bye.
Bye-bye. And so our time is concluded for tonight. And next time we will continue with the journey of Elijah. And so let's just close our eyes for a moment and remember that all of these characters are not separate people, but they are all aspects of a landscape of consciousness. We have all possibilities. If God is everywhere and everything, and God is within us, all those possibilities, but we are learning to make choices. As Jesus said, yes or no. Yes to truth, no to truth. No to error, non-truth. And reclaim the spiritual power that we have lost in the fray. And so, thank you for coming. Thank you, all of you watching. Thank you, Mary, for calling in. Let that be an inspiration to anyone else who might be too shy to call in. And we'll meet next week, same time, 7 o'clock standard. And I hope that time doesn't change in the meantime, but it could.
I think it does the week after that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. All right, so we'll be mindful of that. And so God bless you and thank you. The New Foundation is very grateful. If you would like to support the New Foundation, you may go to the website, or you may send an offering. Or, you know what, I think I'm going to put out something I really, really want, and that is having no idea where it's going to come from, but a technical consultant. Because, today the printer conked out. It prints, but it doesn't print anything. It's not connected to the computer for some reason. So anyway, if anyone in cyberspace wants to be a technical consultant who loves Apple computers as much as I do, please give me a call. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a blessed night, and I'll see you next week. And now I'm going to turn off the streaming. I think there is about actually a 30-second lag.
Yeah, there is. It's very disconcerting.
Is it?
I mean, when you call in, you really just have to call in and not look at what's going on. And you lose about
A
30
minute?
seconds worth of what
30
you're saying.
30 seconds? Have I waited 30 seconds?